All right. Thank you, Chair, organizers, and Seven Bridges for the opportunity to talk about bioinformatics pipelines at CareDx today. So a little intro about CareDx. We're a diagnostic company in the transplant space, fully dedicated to provide transplant patients personalized care for every step of their transplant journey. Can we go to the next slide, please? So typically, the patient's journey when they are in the transplant space starts with the diagnosis and a referral to transplant. So if we go along this, pink line over there, the path, you'll see that there's a big set of events that the patient has to go through: evaluation, they're put on the wait list. Organ offers, surgery, and then the post-transplant journey starts where now they have to be monitored for transplant rejection. So CareDx is dedicated to helping the transplant patient, and we have several products pre and during and post-transplant. So I'll be mostly talking about bioinformatics pipelines in post-transplant today, but we have pre-transplant HLA matching, digital solutions during for EMR integration, and post-transplant we have diagnostic tests that monitor the levels of rejection markers, and also that helps with immunosuppressant modulation. Next slide. So our lab services, so we have a high volume of samples that get processed in our service offering in Bay Area. It's a CLIA CAP New York State accredited lab. We need to produce, high sensitive and reproducible results in a short amount of time. We aim typically to turn it around from processing to reporting in less than 2 days. And all the samples are run through analytically and clinically validated AlloSure workflow. Next slide. So our AlloSure test, so this is an NGS-based test to measure, it's an NGS-based test to measure donor-derived cell-free DNA. So what is donor-derived cell-free DNA? So 1 second. So what is donor-derived cell-free DNA? So when the patient gets a heart or lung or the, say, kidney, the donor organ, their immune system starts attacking the donor organ, and donor cells start streaming in the bloodstream, and they're broken down as a natural process, and cell-free DNA is released. So when we collect blood from plasma, when we collect this and extract, do cell-free DNA rejection, we can see what percent, like we can measure the amount of donor percent versus the recipient, which is correlated with how well the patient is doing. So the AlloSure test is a targeted NGS-based test that uses SNPs to measure the amount of cell-free DNA in the bloodstream. And we don't require prior genotyping of the donor or the recipient. Next slide, please. Along with our NGS, DNA sequencing, we have a gene expression profiling test called Allomap, also available for heart and kidney. So together, Allomap, the gene expression profiling, and the donor-derived cell-free DNA, they do a complementary profiling of the patient's allograft health. Gene expression profiling is based on some gene markers where we look at the expression and correlate with rejection. And again, with AlloSure, with the NGS-based test, we see if there's no graft injury in the top circle there, we wouldn't find much donor-derived cell-free DNA in the bloodstream. And when there's a lot of graft injury, we would find high amounts of donor-derived cell-free DNA. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our general high-level process and data workflow. So samples are accessioned, cell-free DNA is extracted, and library is prepared. After that, it's put on the sequencer. So until this part is all at CareDx. And then after the sequencing data, the data moves to the cloud and goes to the 7Bridges automation process. And the bioinformatics pipeline runs there. And then it comes back to CareDx for quality control and reporting. And the reporting goes out to the patient's doctor. Next slide, please. Yep, so under the hood is the complex automation process that 7Bridges implemented for CareDx. We have an end-to-end solution that incorporates sequencer integration, connection to client-owned internal, like our basically external storage, and multi-cloud capability. So sequencing data is streamed from the sequencer to our SDS S3 bucket, and then it's accessed by 7Bridges platform with their analytical tools and processed. To ensure turnaround times, like quick turnaround times and no delays in the event that there's a cloud provider issue, 7Provider incorporated multi-cloud capability. So we have two analytical regions, a primary region and a backup region that will pick up if there's an issue for processing. And analysis is typically launched on the primary analytical region, and a series of QC steps are applied. And depending on different QC thresholds are set for every run, so for every processing. This depends on the sequencing instruments. So we use different sequencing instruments. So this can be incorporated into the workflow there. And this information is provided by the re-automation, and the sample sheet is uploaded every time it accompanies the raw data that enables this. And then following QC analysis, the sample sheet also carries the information that informs the automation, which analytical tools or which workflows should be applied to the data set. So this allows us to be able to use different analytical flows within the same automation solution. And it's very critical to how the process works. And it's basically executed as needed with the conditionals. And at every step of the analysis, execution is closely monitored in case there's an issue or delay. And if there's an issue, a computational resource issue, or some other, bandwidth issue, the analysis is relaunched in the backup region to ensure that results are not delayed and we can meet our turnaround time. Since these are critical samples, this is a crucial part. And then once the whole pipeline is run, the data is automatically exported back to the CareDx storage. So during this whole process, we get, close task monitoring and personalized notifications if something fails, and also a detailed billing that will bill different departments depending on which workflow has run, which enables, fine-grained billing and processing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so a little shift. So we basically, I mentioned that how we can use different workflows, and the system enables that. So we also recently started introducing. So CareDx started as an organ donor company, but now we're going into cellular therapy space. So this is now you'll see a little similar, journey, but this time it's not the patient isn't getting a solid organ, but is getting hematopoietic or stem cell or engineered like CAR T cell therapy. So we offer solutions that are suitable for this space, cellular therapy space. So in this space, we have AlloHeme and AlloCell in the post-HCT space, where we monitor with a similar workflow. So just a little data along that line. So next slide, please. So AlloCell is our basically our product that uses that is for PK monitoring. So we can see after the cells are engrafted to the patient, we can see after infusion whether it's expanding and contracting and persisting. So we expect to see a correlation over time. So our pipelines are easily adjustable to accommodate this as well, this new product. And we are sensitively and accurately are able to measure product cells kinetics with the workflow that I previously mentioned. So with a little bit of data here, so we can measure percent CAR T therapy. So we have an expected level with pre-spike levels, and we can with AlloCell we can reliably measure to a very low and highly sensitive level and very reproducible. Next slide. So hopefully I quickly demonstrated that streamlined NGS pipelines benefit transplant patients. So and this is basically done with as the volume goes up or as the demand or need arises, we are able to modify our pipelines or with their rigid and robust setup. We're able to process high volumes of patients samples and in a very highly sensitive, specific, and reproducible way, with again like a short turnaround time in an clinically validated space. So with that, I can take some questions.
Very good. Okay, we have time for questions. Any questions in the room?
Microphone is coming.
Fantastic talk. Thank you. I have a question about your multi-cloud setup. Many organizations have run into challenges with data egress charges with that sort of a setup. Have you encountered anything along those lines?
Could you repeat egress charges?
Yeah, the charges the cloud providers impose when you exfiltrate data out of their environment.
We have not.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Are there any questions in the chat box?
Not at this moment.
Maybe I'd like to shout out to our Seven Bridges team there. Seven Bridges team on in the room. Do you want to comment about the previous question also? From your point of view, did you want to answer that?
Thanks so much. Absolutely. So the Seven Bridges platform features multi-cloud, so you're able to compute on Google, Azure, AWS, wherever your data lives. And we also have connected cloud storage, so you can bring your buckets and mount them to our analysis platform. And so where this comes in for egress costs is, of course, if you're computing in one region but your data lives in another, you're going to pay extra. You're going to pay for that egress above and beyond the analysis cost itself. And so with the multi-cloud capability, together with connected cloud storage, you're able to select the region in which you compute. You can select the region where your data lives, and that way you don't end up paying those egress costs. And on the platform, when you run an analysis, we show you the price, and you can click and get a breakdown to confirm that there's no egress charge.
Very good.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions here in the room? So we still have a few minutes, right? So I guess barring, so if I could ask one, so my take on this is the presentation here is largely focused on production grade, mature pipelines. Is that an accurate assessment?
Correct.
So can you comment a little bit on what the process looks like when you guys have new technologies that you're exploring, new assays that you're trying to develop? Once you've done the sort of innovative research to develop the appropriate NGS pipelines, what does it look like to transition those into a production mode?
Sure. Yeah, so we typically, do initially all the product development in-house, working very closely across different, groups, R&D, and sorry, I hear an echo, but yeah. So we develop it in-house, and typically once it's ready, we talk, and at some point, actually, once we know the structure, we bring in our partner, like Seven Bridges, and start working with them in building the pipeline. It can start typically can start as a research pipeline without the production part. And then once it's mature enough and the product has been verified and validated analytically, right? So now we're ready. And then after that, all the pieces are in place already because we've been communicating. So it's basically a smooth transition to go to production typically.
Very good, thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, so I think if not, if we could all thank our speaker.